Then they took Jesus from Caiaphas to Pilate's headquarters. It was early in the morning. They themselves did not enter the headquarters so as to avoid ritual defilement and to be able to eat the Passover. So Pilate went out to them and said, "What accusation do you bring against this man?" They answered, "If this man were not a criminal, we would not have handed him over to you." Pilate said to them, "Take him yourselves and judge him according to your law." The Jews replied, "We are not permitted to put anyone to death." This was to fulfill what Jesus had said when he indicated the kind of death he would die. Then Pilate entered the headquarters again, summoned Jesus, and asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus answered, "Do you ask this on your own, or did others tell you about me?" Pilate replied, "I'm not a Jew, am I? Your own nation and the chief priests have handed you over to me. What have you done?" Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not from this world. If my kingdom were from this world, my followers would be fighting to keep me from being handed over to the Jews. But as it is, my kingdom is not from here." Pilate asked him, "So you are a king?" Jesus answered, "You say that I am a king. For this I was born, and for this I came into the world, to testify to the truth. Everyone who belongs to the truth listens to my voice." Pilate asked him, "What is the truth?" After he had said this, he went out to the Jews again and told them, "I find no case against you, but you have a custom that I release someone for you at the Passover. Do you want me to release for you the king of the Jews?" They shouted in reply, "Not this man, but Barabbas." Now Barabbas was a bandit. Then Pilate took Jesus and had him flogged. And the soldiers wove a crown of thorns and put it on his head, and they dressed him in a purple robe. They kept coming up to him saying, "Hail, King of the Jews," and striking him in the face. Pilate went out again and said to them, "Look, I am bringing him out to you to let you know that I find no case against him." So Jesus came out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe. Pilate said to them, "Here's the man." When the chief priests and the police saw him, they shouted, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" Pilate said to them, "Take him yourselves and crucify him. I find no case against him." The Jews answered him, "We have a law, and according to that law he ought to die, because he has claimed to be the Son of God." Now when Pilate heard this, he was more afraid than ever. He entered his headquarters again and asked Jesus, "Where are you from?" But Jesus gave him no answer. Pilate therefore said to him, "Do you refuse to speak to me? Do you not know that I have power to release you and power to crucify you?" Jesus answered him, "You would have no power over me unless it had been given you from above. Therefore, the one who handed me over to you is guilty of a greater sin." From then on, Pilate tried to release him, but the Jews cried out, "If you release this man, you are no friend of the emperor. Everyone who claims to be a king sets himself against the emperor."
When Pilate heard these words, he brought Jesus outside and sat on the judge's bench at a place called the Stone Pavement, or in Hebrew, Gabbatha. Now it was the day of preparation for the Passover, and it was about noon. He said to the Jews, "Here is your king." They cried out, "Away with him! Away with him! Crucify him!" Pilate asked them, "Shall I crucify your king?" The chief priest answered, "We have no king but the emperor." Then he handed him over to them to be crucified. So they took Jesus, and carrying the cross by himself, he went out to what is called the place of the skull, which in Hebrew is called Golgotha. There they crucified him, and with two others, one on either side with Jesus between them. Pilate had an inscription written and put on the cross. It read, "Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews." Many of the Jews read this inscription because the place where Jesus was crucified was near the city, and it was written in Hebrew, in Latin, and in Greek. Then the chief priests of the Jews said to Pilate, "Do not write, 'The King of the Jews,' but 'This man said, I am King of the Jews.'" Pilate answered, "What I have written, I have written." When the soldiers had crucified Jesus, they took his clothes and divided them into 4 parts, one for each soldier. They also took his tunic. Now, the tunic was seamless, woven into one piece from the top. So they said to one another, "Let us not tear it, but cast lots for it to see who will get it." This was to fulfill what the scripture says, "They divided my clothes among themselves, and for my clothing they cast lots." And that is what the soldiers did. Meanwhile, standing near the cross of Jesus were his mother and his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. When Jesus saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved standing beside her, he said to his mother, "Woman, here is your son." Then he said to the disciple, "Here is your mother." And from that hour, the disciple took her into his own home. After this, when Jesus knew that all was now finished, he said, in order to fulfill the scripture, "I am thirsty." A jar of sour wine was standing there. So they put a sponge full of the wine on a branch of hyssop and held it to his mouth. When Jesus had received the wine, he said, "It is finished." Then he bowed his head and gave up his spirit.
In the name of God, the Creator, Redeemer, and Sustainer. And Pilate asked Jesus, "What is truth?" Sounds like chaos. Feels like chaos. I imagine it looked like chaos too. Everyone claiming to be on the right side of justice, on the right side of truth, the Jewish authority, the Roman authority, the gathered people. And yet one man, the man of truth, stands within this chaotic scene with an incredible sense of purpose. Truth will stand like that. He has sat with Jews and non-Jews, with the rich and the poor. He has attended to women and to men and to children. He has seen the unseen, heard those with no voice, touched the untouchables. He's fished, shared water and wine, broken bread, washed feet. Truth will live like that. And now he stands before Pilate. Now don't be fooled by the gospel narrative. Pilate is no friend of Jesus. The writers of the Gospels paint a neutral or even somewhat positive picture of him. But historians tell us otherwise. Sources describe him as brutal, prone to abuse, known to authorize executions without trial. One source puts it quite simply: Pilate was a detestable person. He actually lived in Caesarea on the coast, not wanting to live in Jerusalem, traveling to Jerusalem only when he had to. And he probably didn't want to be in Jerusalem that day. For Passover was always known as a time of high tension in the city. Pilgrims gathered, filling the city to overflowing, and the Roman guards gathered too, ostensibly to defend against any trouble should violence or outright rebellion occur. But then the Jewish authorities handed Jesus right over to Pilate. And Pilate's day changed. When he questioned Jesus, Jesus offers a very simple confession. I came to testify to the truth. I came to testify to the truth. Ah, that troubling word, truth. What is truth? Pilate asks. But he doesn't wait for an answer, doesn't want to hear an answer, because no doubt at some level he knows. He knows that the truth of which Jesus speaks, the truth to which Jesus testifies, is not a truth that Pilate has ever lived, much less believed in. So instead, Pilate brings Jesus outside, and playing to the rising anger and emotion of the chief priests and the police and the gathered crowd, lets them pronounce the verdict on Jesus. Lets them announce what he most certainly expected, even wanted: Away with him! Away with him! Crucify him! They cry. And so, carrying the cross himself, they lead Jesus to Golgotha and crucify him. Truth will be dismissed like that. After a while, crowds have melted away. Pilate has surely returned home. The chief priests and soldiers, too. Yet standing near the cross of Jesus, near enough to hear his weakened voice, are Mary, his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Clopas, Mary Magdalene, and the disciple whom Jesus loved. They don't seem to be in any rush to leave. They know nothing more than what has come before. They know nothing of what is to come. And yet that is enough to hold them there. Standing before the cross, remembering all that was, all that is, truth. Were you there when they crucified my Lord? The hymn asks. No, we were not. But we are there now. And I invite us to stop this day, this hour, and not rush on. To stop and stand with the Marys and the disciple whom Jesus loved, and watch and listen. Listen for the invisible witness that just might pass by, to testify to his truth. A man who once had leprosy might explain that truth extended a healing touch to him without fear of revulsion, but only kindness and compassion. A Samaritan woman who went to gather water at a well one day might offer that truth not only spoke with her, but offered her living water, though truth knew well the mistakes and misfortunes of her life. And a young boy might give witness to truth, taking his small basket of just a few fish and a couple of loaves of barley bread and feeding thousands simply because they were hungry. What might your witness be? What experience of his truth might you offer this day standing before the cross? What might you say? Jesus answered Pilate, "For this I was born. For this I came into the world, to testify to the truth. And the truth must never be allowed to die."